sinners, tax collectors. He eats with them. Doesn't sound like much, does it? Unless you were really a person of that day and age in Jesus' time, you would understand that sinners were people who essentially rejected their identity because they were called sinners because they didn't follow the law of Moses as was prescribed. And every good Jew of their day followed the law of Moses, or at least they strove to do it. They tried to do it. No, if you were called a sinner, you were a sinner not because of the private peccadillos of our life, but because you were a notorious sinner. It was clear to everybody else that you were that way. Oh, and the tax collectors. Ooh, we can relate to those a little bit better, can't we? Who likes tax collectors? Not too many people, I don't think, unless you have one in your family, perhaps. But you have to understand, tax collectors in tax collectors in Jesus' time didn't simply work for the government agency. They weren't agents of the IRS, and we don't like them either. But you have to understand how taxes were collected at the time of Jesus. See, the Romans, they were the oppressing government, an imperial power that had taken away the freedom of the people and levied excess taxes on them. And so tax collectors, who were your own kin, your own neighbors, were thought to be collaborators with an oppressive and occupying government. And even if you were a tax collector for the local authorities, the king in Jerusalem, well, you weren't much better because they were not the legitimate kings according to the Holy Scriptures. They were not the sons of David. They were mere puppets of the imperial power in Rome. So paying taxes to one or the other was not a happy thing. And beyond that, unlike our own tax collectors in this day who are paid by us through the government, they're paid a salary and so on, that didn't happen there. The government didn't pay them, you did. And I don't mean through the tax system. No, they were permitted to levy a surcharge on top of the tax that was due. And so in order for them to maintain their position, what they had to do was collect enough tax from you to pay what was demanded by the imperial power or the local king, and then they would put on top of that an extra charge because that's how they made their living. And there were no rules about how much you could charge. So maybe if they were nice, they charged you half of what you paid in taxes as their portion, or maybe double, or triple, or quadruple. There were no rules. And many tax collectors got very rich. Because if you owed $1 to the emperor, they would charge you maybe $4. So you see, sinners who rejected their identity as part of the tribes of Israel, they didn't follow the law of Moses. Tax collectors, collaborators, abusers who stole your money. Jesus is eating with these characters. Now, eating, that's an important thing too, because eating, after all, in the time of Jesus, hospitality was a hallmark of their culture. And eating meant you invited your friends and family in. You were vulnerable to them and they to you. And so eating at the same table with them was a mark of approval. It's no wonder the scribes and the Pharisees were grumbling. Another word that is used to translate this word from the Greek is murmuring. You know what murmuring is? It's like when you You kind of talk to somebody like this, so behind their back, but never anything nice. That's how this story starts. Jesus knows this is what's going on. And so he tells them, Luke tells us, he tells them a story, a parable. Now, we know that story very well. We call it the story of the prodigal son. And like most stories that we know well, lots of times we just read the top line, and get it over with, and we forget that there's a lot of little details in there that actually flesh it out a little bit and give us a little deeper meaning of what's going on here. So let's talk about some of them. There was this boy, this young man, one of two sons. And we know the story. He goes to his father and he says, "Father, give me what's coming to me." Basically, he wants his share of the inheritance. Now, we know that part of the story. But think about this. Think about yourself as the father. This child of yours is coming up to you and wanting for himself that which is only his when you're dead. Ooh, that puts a little different spin on it, doesn't it? The father could be thinking, he wants me dead. That's why he wants this stuff. Because it's his only when I'm dead. But the father doesn't hold that against him, and he says, "All right, fine, you want it, you can have it." And he goes, and he does whatever he needs to do, cash in property and so on, and gives the son several bags of gold or silver or whatever the currency might have been to make good this debt that the father feels he owes to his son. And the son goes off to a faraway place, to the big city as it were, and he just spends it all. And suddenly, it's wonderful until it ain't. Until suddenly it reaches into the bag and there's nothing left. Well, he is a bit resourceful, so he says, I got to do what I got to do. So he goes out and he hires himself out to one of the local landowners, and they put him in charge of something. It's not exactly a great job, but it's something, or at least he thinks, at least at the start. But think about that job. He's feeding what? The pigs. This boy is a Jew. The pig is seen as one of the most unclean animals, is not to be countenanced, and yet he is now charged with feeding them, making sure that they are well kept, that they are okay. For a Jewish boy, there could be no worse job in the world. This guy had hit rock bottom. Now, not only that, he wasn't even making enough money to buy himself some food. And so he yearned to eat the slop that he had to give the pigs. And so Luke tells us the boy came to his senses. Now we've seen that phrase before, but in a very different context. Before we saw this phrase at the very beginning of Luke's gospel in the 4th chapter, when Jesus emerges out of the wilderness and he comes to the synagogue, as Luke says, as was his custom, and he is handed the scroll of the prophet Isaiah, and he reads, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, the Spirit of the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor, to set captives free," etc., etc., etc. You know that portion well. We read it every St. Luke's Day. But we see we end that before this part comes out. And that is that the people hearing this from Jesus at first are amazed at him, and then all of a sudden rebel against him and want to throw him over a cliff. And when all this is transpiring, what's happening is his family comes along and wants to take him home because, you see, the word they use is he is beside himself. He has lost his senses. Now, no such thing was happening to Jesus. He knew exactly who he was. He knew exactly what his mission and ministry was to be. He knew exactly what was supposed to happen. So he was not in possession of his senses. But that's what it means. It means he's crazy. And so here comes the boy. He comes to his senses. In other words, he realized that he was acting like a crazy person before. And he said, why am I doing this? My father's servants have plenty to eat. They have a place to stay. I'm going to go home. And I'm going to tell them, I know I've screwed up. I know that I didn't do right. I'm not trying to make you my dad anymore. I know that. I just want to be one of your hired hands. I just want to survive. So he has this little thing he's saying. Father, I know that I've sinned against God and in your sight. Please, etc., etc. You've heard the story already. I'm not going to repeat it. But you can imagine that when you're going to say that kind of thing to somebody who you love or somebody who you care for or who has that kind of authority over you, you want to make sure you get it right. So you can just imagine he's been rehearsing this over and over and over and over again as he's making this journey back to his hometown. And here is the little detail that we miss sometimes, and that is that he gets there and his father sees him far away. What does that mean? It means that he was looking for him. The father never just washed his hands of him and said, well, we're done with that. He was constantly looking for him, searching for him. He was like on the porch or maybe in the front yard, constantly looking. Is today the day? Is today the day he's going to come back? And suddenly he sees him and he runs to him. Runs to him. This old man. And the boy starts to give his well-rehearsed speech, and he doesn't even get through it. The dad is throwing his arms around him, giving him a kiss, screaming to the servants, go get him a robe. Look at him, the way he's dressed. Put some shoes on his feet. He's barefoot. Bring a ring. Because I found him again. What a wonderful story. It's not the end. Jesus goes on. He says, then there was this other brother. And he was out in the fields doing what he was supposed to be doing, working hard, getting all sweaty and dirty. He comes home, and he's probably very tired, wants to put his feet up. But he hears this noise. He smells beef cooking. And he hears dancing, music, and all of this partying. So he calls one of the servants open, and he says, what's going on? And he says, well, your father's rejoicing because this brother of yours that was lost has been found. He has him back safe and sound. Even the servant sounds like he's happy about this. Oh, but not this boy. No. I don't know about you, but if I were that younger son and I did those things and I came home, no dad of mine would be looking for me, running after me. Instead, it would be one of these. Where have you been? What have you been up to? Probably both my parents. They love me dearly, don't get me wrong. But I'll ask you, which one of those sets of parents would you have experienced most likely, at least for the first little bit? Right? So you can imagine that the eldest son was very much of that mind. Because he says, he took your property and he squandered it. In dissolute living. That's not a nice thing to say about somebody. And yet now this is what you do? This party? What is wrong with you, Papa? And Papa says, listen, boy, everything I have is yours already. Yeah, but you didn't even give me a kid goat. Well, did you? I can just imagine this conversation. Did you ever ask me for one? Or are you so dutiful that you would never dare do that? We don't know whether that part of the conversation happened. We can just imagine it. Yeah. So here's the boy and the man. And they're having a fight. He didn't even want to go into the house. And the father is pleading with him, begging him to rejoice. Since when do we have to be begged to be happy? Except when we think of ourselves much too good for the other. And we resent that no one recognizes how good we are. The marvelous thing about parables is that Jesus uses them to teach in a very traditional way. This is the way the rabbis taught in Jesus' time. It wasn't some apodictic, well, that's a fancy word, teacher-like kind of thing where you start giving people, well, this means that, and this means this, and this means that. No, you tell the story, and you let people's imaginations start to turn. And parables are a particular way of teaching in this culture, because in the parable, the idea is not that, oh, the Father stands for this and the Son stands for that. No. You who listen are able to see yourself in the story. And so the question I have for you today is this: who are you? Are you the father? Are you the elder son? Are you the younger son? Are you the slave who brought the good news? Or we could even stretch it a bit more. Are you one of the sinners or tax collectors? Who are you in today's gospel lesson, gospel story? Who are